It's May 5th, so let me share with you the projects that I was working on in the month of April. Welcome to this video, and if you are been here before, welcome back. I am super excited to sit down and share with you what I was knitting on mainly. I don't have much but knitting to share. I haven't shared many other projects that I work on. I do sew and I naturally dye, and I have showed some of those creations that have come out of the dye pot of adding plant materials with yarn and seeing what colors come from that. But most of what I have to share today is knitting related. And yes, so we will jump right into it. I did want to mention that the lighting may be changing throughout this video. I am recording in the morning, which is the time that worked this week for me to film, and you still get to enjoy the morning bird sounds. I'm pretty sure you can hear all these birds in the background, and that's one of the blessings of getting to record in the woods, is you get all those sounds from the different times of the day. And so because I'm filming in the morning today, you get all the morning bird sounds. But the lighting may change because the sun is going to come right over the treetops in a minute. But this seemed to be the best place for me to get good lighting and good background, quiet enough, but still have the pretty birds in the background for you to hear and see what I have to share with you this month. So let's get right into the projects I was working on, and I hope you enjoy it. Alright, we just did a big quick background change due to lighting, but I hope we'll be good for a little bit now. And I'm going to start off and share with you the knitting project that I finished in the month of April, and that was a pair of socks for my youngest sister. My youngest sister is just 18 months, so there's a lot of years difference between me and my youngest sister, but that is a fun excuse to knit little baby toddler, she's kind of out of the baby stage now, socks. And I had chosen Hannah G Knits was the designer, and she had designed the back to school sock set pattern, and I had knit it in Quince and Co Finch, so that's Quince and Co, one of their fingering weight yarns, and I had knit it, the color that I had picked was the color clay, so it's this really nice soft yet clay kind of pink. It's really pretty. You'll have seen pictures. I'll put pictures and video up right before this of it because I did not bring it up with me to film in the woods. I just didn't have it accessible at the time, but I'll make sure you got a good look of it. And I also used Salted Wool, which is a Virginia local to me in my state yarn company, and they produce a yarn called Llama-Rama, which is a very light fingering weight yarn, and it's very hairy, and it was perfect to knit the ruffle on this sock. I had chosen to use the ruffle version of Hannah's sock pattern. It comes in so many different customization kind of things you can do in the sock pattern. Mainly, I think there were three ways you can change the contrasting, you can use contrasting cuff and all that stuff, or you could just do the plain sock, or you could do the ruffle option, and I chose the ruffle option, and I was very pleased with that. I loved the little ruffle. It was fun to knit, and was just really happy with Hannah's design. It was just the perfect fitting sock. It's got a nice thick cuff, it's ribbed down the leg and on top of the instep on the foot, and I was just really pleased with the design, really excited about how versatile and how many ways I could customize it and how she indicated that in the pattern. And I was also happy with the size range because those are the kind of patterns that I will knit over and over again. About mention anything I changed, I did knit a the size smaller than my sister would have been, so she's 18 months, but I knit the size, I think, 12 month. Part of that was because when I swatched, my swatch was a little bit bigger, and instead of reswatching, I took the risk of just dropping down a size, and it actually worked perfectly. They are perfectly fitting in a little bit snug, which I like because from experience knitting with 100% wool yarn and then knitting socks from it, I found you get a lot of stretch over time and it will get really stretched out, and so I'm very happy I did that size choice. And I knit it on a US 1, so that's a 2.25 millimeter needle. So that's the project that I finished in the month of April. The final thing I just remembered I wanted to mention about the back to school sock pattern was it is an afterthought heel. And that was my first time knitting an afterthought heel, and it was a very great pattern. I've had a really good experience using her pattern as my first afterthought heel. The instructions were very clear. I believe there was a link in the video, in the pattern, to a video, and that was super helpful, and I really enjoyed doing the afterthought heel, and I think her pattern was perfect for it. So I did want to mention that. And if you've never done an afterthought heel before and you have little socks that you would like to knit for somebody's little feet, I would encourage you to give her pattern a try. It was definitely a worthwhile pattern to purchase, and I would, like I said last time, I already have plans to knit it again, and I will talk about that a little bit later on in this video. It looks like this entire video will have slightly different backgrounds due to the lighting, but hopefully you'll still get a good view of everything as I move around. Now I'm going to share with you the projects that I was knitting on in the month of April but did not complete. Although this next project I'm going to share with you is kind of a half-completed project. It is another pair of socks that I've been working on. The pattern is Wish You Were Here socks by the Kitchen Sink Shop, and I will try to include maybe a photo of the pattern I printed so you can get a little view of it, but if I show it right here, it's going to just be backwards. So I have one sock complete, which is pretty fast for me. I am a little bit slower knitter, so again, unblocked, so nothing's very neat yet, but you can see along, there you go, along the top of all the way down the leg and down to the foot, you have this really pretty simple lace pattern, and it is not the same on both the left and right socks. So this is the right sock, and so you have the lace running down the right side of the instep, and then on the other side there's none. So I'm currently working on the left sock now, and not pull out anything. I got my extra needle, but I was trying to make sure it didn't have stitches on it. So here is the left sock, and as you can see, we've got this left the stitch pattern, the lace stitch pattern is running along the left side this time, and I really like that, so that when you have the socks on, the lace stitch pattern is kind of coordinating to your feet. I think it'll look really sweet and pretty. I was really excited to knit this pattern for one couple reasons. One, I was trying to use up, as I said last time, I had this yarn I have right here, and this is Malabrigo sock, and it is a superwash wool. I think it's 100% superwash wool, and that yarn I picked up along with another skein back in the winter for gift sock knitting that I was going to gift, because I normally knit socks with 100% wool that is not superwash. That's just 100% wool that I have to hand block out. And I like doing that. I like how natural it is. I have had socks last. It's hard to say how durable those socks are because they get worn so hard in my family. We live in an old farmhouse. There's wood floors. There's little chips in the floor sometimes. Just the nature of the old house as we're fixing it up. And I have people that love their hand knit socks and they wear them all the time. And so holes come in usually a couple months after finishing, sometimes a couple weeks. It depends on how hard they've been worn. but I still really like using the 100% wool, and I do not mind darning. I'm learning to darn better each time I have to practice. But for gifting, I've always been hesitant to assume that um, someone is interested in doing that. Like maybe they would like a hand knit gift, but to actually take the time to, hand block. I'm not wanting to assume that someone is interested in it. And because it's a gift and I just want them to be able to enjoy it, I will give it to people with the wool that's been superwashed. So I was so happy to find the Wish You Were Here sock pattern. It is a free pattern. I don't know if I mentioned that on Ravelry. I thoroughly don't mind, and I really encourage designers to charge if they're interested in for their patterns, because there's so much hard work and effort in creating a knitting pattern. I know from as a tech editor perspective, I sit back and edit and appreciate how much effort and math the designers have already put into patterns, and I'm just there to check and to make sure that they can confidently put their patterns out and know that knitters are going to get the results they intended. But if people decide to put their patterns up for free, with this pattern, saw the pattern, thoroughly loved the look and a feel of it. It's very springy. I loved how springy this lace on the sock feels, and it's making it feel like the perfect spring project. And so I picked her sock pattern, and I would encourage you to go look at the kitchen sink shop. She has a number of other sock patterns on there that I was looking at, that I might be visiting her shop again in my future of sock knitting. She definitely has an eye for beautiful sock patterns. So I'm trying to think what else I want to share. I'm knitting those on US 1 2.25 millimeter needles as well. I am knitting according to pattern. I have not made any modifications that I can remember. And I'm knitting the size medium. Sorry, I am next to a road, so there will be cars. But there's two sizes, and I knit the size medium of the Wish You Were Here socks, and I enjoy knitting them. The pattern is really clear, it's well written. I really appreciate that, and it's just been a really relaxing, enjoyable knit. The colors have been so fun, and that's probably why so much knitting for me. That's a lot of knitting for me in a month, to get that sock done, I think in less than 2 weeks. Yeah, I really am enjoying this pattern, and I would highly encourage you to go look at the kitchen sink shop and her patterns. And I also really am appreciating the Malabrigo sock yarn. This is the second pair of socks I've knit this year with the Malabrigo sock yarn. It's really durable, it's really pretty colors, just a fun to knit with, and I need to check in with the people I've gifted it to, see how it's washing up for them. Maybe one day I don't know if you should ask people that, but to see how it's holding up and if they've machine washed them or whatever. Anyway, that's the first project that I was working on but did not complete in the month of April. The next project that I was working on in April was the Buttonside Sweater, which you have been seeing for a number of podcast episodes now. And now it is front's done, back's done, and we are working on this sleeve. And hopefully going to be completing that soon. And then all I have to do is the other sleeve, sew on the buttons block, and I think we need to do some collar around here. And then that will be done. I have really enjoyed this sweater. It is knit in worsted weight, which is not what the pattern called for. It is a much thicker sweater than I believe Jennifer Dassau would have intended. I got gauge, but it was a much thicker, a little bit more stiffer material, because I was using worsted weight instead of, I believe the pattern called for a DK weight. And this is Woven Andes in their worsted weight in the color, I believe it was Evergreen. So that is 100% wool, and it's been a really great knit. I'm going to be including a little video clip right before this and sharing with you the book that I'm actually knitting this out of, Jennifer Dassau wrote and designed a whole book of knitting patterns that are full of short rows, and her book is so informative. I purchased this in the fall of 2022 when I was taking the Tech Editor Hub's Learn to Tech Edit knitting course. That was where I learned about tech editing and how I kind of started to get into tech editing. And the reason I bought it was I was struggling a little bit through the short rows that I would have to check in patterns in that course. And I was like, I need to learn everything there is to know about short rows. I need to knit them more. I need to look at patterns of them more, and maybe pull up my spreadsheet and practice in patterns in this book, and just practice checking short rows and getting my mind around how they work so I can apply those and check those correctly. And so I picked up Jennifer Dassau's book, and she goes over, I want to say, probably every short row method that I've ever heard of. She goes over the German method, she goes over the wrap and turn method, she goes over all these methods of knitting short rows, and she talks about how to do them. There's really great photos showing you how to do these methods, and if it's on a knit row or a purl row, how you would do them work them differently. And then she also talks about where you would use. So the best, for instance, you have a German short row, where in a design like if you're designing, when would you use a German short row or a wrap and turn? Like, which would be better in a certain situation? And she talks through the different reasons why you might consider using this short row method over this one in different instances in your design. And that was really informative. And on top of that, every method of short row has a selection of patterns she has designed specifically with that short row method. So the Buttonside Sweater was to practice German short rows. It's a German method of short rows. And I've really gotten familiar with working those, but I've also gotten to see how they're used in design. This sweater not only uses short rows on the back neck shaping, it uses short rows to create this kind of beautiful hem on both the front and the back, where it's curved, and that was really neat to work and learn. But I really not only have enjoyed that book for all that I've been learning about short rows, but just the pattern selection is really nice. I have some books on my shelf that are really instructional in terms of knitting techniques, or knitting knowledge, but I don't appreciate or knit from the patterns, and they just don't seem very like something I would wear or someone I know would wear. That's something I'm always looking for in patterns. Would I actually knit that and wear that? But this book was very different, and I bought the book and I was like, I would also knit a ton of these patterns beyond just reading the information. So I'm gonna include some clips of that book and encourage you to pick it up if you are looking for a new knitting book, or you just want to learn a lot more about short rows and get some patterns in the meantime as you're learning. That has been a great book. So this project is almost done, and I'm very excited to be wrapping it up, and I will be sharing with you in a few minutes some thoughts I have for the next sweater to cast on. I am trying to keep a sweater always going, as I take a little bit longer with knitting sweaters, but I also just enjoy having them on the needles, and I am learning so much with every sweater. I feel more comfortable with learning about the design of a sweater and editing a sweater and measurements and all that stuff, but I'm trying to get my knitting time and my knitting experience in actually knitting sweaters more, because I enjoy it, and I feel like there's also just something you learn when you're doing the actual knitting work. So the final things to note that I want to note on the Buttonside Sweater is I am using a US size 2, and that is what I got gauge with. I also wanted to share that I've kind of started to try it on now that everything, you can kind of squeeze through it and keep the stitches from slipping off the needles at the sleeve and try it on. And it is slightly small. It fits pretty well, but it's definitely on the more fitted side. And I slightly was concerned about that, yet I'm not too concerned because that's what my swatch was like. My swatch was quite small compared to the gauge measurements, and then after blocking, it grew really nice, and it was perfect at the gauge. So I got gauge after blocking, which is, I believe, what the pattern specifies as well. You need to get the gauge measurements to match after blocking. So As I knit, I am constantly reminding myself that I expect that what happened in the swatch is going to happen in the final sweater. And if worse came to worse and it was just too small, I know there's someone around me that's going to have a body size slightly smaller than me, and I hope it will fit them well. So those are the final things I wanted to note on the Buttonside sweater. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in a few weeks to share my projects from May.